Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Jamie. Great to be here.
So Patrick, why don't we start with, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Well, I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Securency. Securency is a blockchain-based digital assets infrastructure company, really focused on bringing blockchain technology to the traditional world of securities and really traditional assets, leveraging the power of blockchain and focused on really a compliance framework to streamline the movement of value.
Now, we're talking a lot at the moment about wealth management and in particular digital assets and how they're going to feature in portfolios going forward. What do you feel are like the greatest hurdles for people in terms of adopting digital assets?
Yeah, well, so I think that, when we talk about digital assets, and again, focusing on a digital wrapper around assets that wealth managers and investors are used to seeing today, but a digital wrapper that streamlines things. And so, my prediction is, of course, that everything is going to be moved to this wrapper within the next decade. But great question on hurdles and obstacles. I think number one, there's a discourse in the marketplace that sort of falls on two sides. You're either completely anarchistic and in favor of decentralization, or you say, oh well, this DeFi stuff is never going to work and it's all going to be traditional finance and this is just kind of a gimmick. The answer, as usually happens, lies in the middle. So I think balance is one. And I think the second thing is really abstracting away the complexity. And that means, one, talking about the assets and the outcomes as opposed to talking about the kind of more sort of detailed nuances of the technology itself, which removes a lot of the fear and a lot of the uncertainty. I like to say, some folks never thought that grandma would give up her checkbook, and yet here she is with online banking. And that's because it was simple on the front end, right? And so that's the second part of it, is abstracting away the complexity of using these assets. So it's those two things, I think, that will spur adoption.
Do you think there's too much, or there needs to be a separation between people who are speculating to try and make money and people who actually understand the utility of blockchain technology? Because in some ways, I feel like, to use Bitcoin as the pioneering asset, but it seems to me that Bitcoin was almost too much, was a victim of its own success to a degree. It became too much, it just sort of went up too quickly, it drew too much people in, and now it's sort of come back down, a bit like the dot-com boom. And a bit like the dot-com boom, do you see those analogies there with the internet and with the dot-com boom and how cryptocurrency is playing out?
Yeah, 100%. So it is a great analogy. And of course, partly this goes back to the previous point, which is people use the internet now without knowing how it works. It's just not relevant. They're now familiar with the outcomes and the possibilities. So I think the same is true here. But on the point of complexity and focusing on what you refer to as a more speculative aspect of it. So yes, it's absolutely true. People get really focused on the price of Dogecoin or something like that, and not really looking at the tremendous utility of the underlying technology. And so what we do is, when we focus on really thorny questions that have plagued the financial services industry, clearing and settlement, counterparty risk that's associated with that. When we talk about the cross-jurisdictional movement of value, having to deal with different regulations, right? So if you think about, why does it take so long to move value across borders? And it's usually a compliance issue, and they're usually a siloed system talking to another siloed system because of compliance. And if you can automate that compliance and streamline the movement, that's the real value. But I do think that there is a value that crypto has played in showing these possibilities. The fact that, when Bitcoin came out, people said, hang on a second, I can move value from one side of the world to the other at the push of a button. And certainly that has its downsides in the form of money laundering and other kind of illicit behavior. But that demonstration was powerful, and it spurred a lot of innovation in the traditional finance space. And it's that innovation that I think we really ought to be focused on.
So are you talking a lot with banks to try and help them to work out how to make their payment systems and all the things you've been talking about in terms of security, help them move more into the digital world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in fact, that's a core focus for us. So we work with a lot of the largest institutions. What we're really, again, focused on is that kind of that deep infrastructure. And we recognize sort of early on that as these institutions look to make this transition, they're afraid of the complexity and also the disruption of the kind of the rip and replace. So we really sought to create technology that could interface it with existing infrastructure and allow for an orderly sort of transition. And I think that's really important. I think the industry needs to really kind of embrace that concept that it's not either or, and you don't have to create a new world in which your digital assets live here and your traditional assets live here. We can bring that together seamlessly and allow for this transition, because everything will move on these rails, as I said, in the next decade.
So what do you tell individuals who need to prepare themselves for a more digital banking system? What's the best way that they can prepare? Number
one, to not overthink it. You will be able to, access a greater inventory, a larger inventory, and have better distribution options if you're an issuer. But it won't look terribly different, and you shouldn't worry about what's happening in the background. I mean, you should from a security perspective if you're an issuer, if you're a financial services provider, and you should, of course, from a compliance perspective. But for wealth managers and their clients, I think that the experience will be really kind of a seamless one. That they're not going to be focused on the digital wrapper; they're going to be focused on the assets and the opportunities.
And looking out into 2023, what is one prediction you have in the world of wealth management and how we manage our own money?
So 2023 might be a little bit early, but I would say within the next 3 to 5 years, the wealth managers will be very early adopters at scale of these digital assets, particularly in the private markets, because the potential for improved, enhanced distribution, liquidity, better pricing mechanisms, all of that is what comes on the back of these new digital rails. And I think wealth managers are going to be, again, among the first movers there, seeing the opportunities that they can create for their clients. And in fact, we're already beginning to see kind of the first wave of this. And so that would be my prediction for the next couple of years.
And I do just want to ask, what do you classify as a digital asset? Because obviously we're not just talking cryptocurrencies, we're talking NFTs, we're talking digital stocks and bonds. Like, what else can we put in that bracket?
That's really such an excellent question, and actually one that is near and dear to my heart. I think that we need a better lexicon, a better taxonomy for these assets. What I mean is things that we see today, traditional funds and equities, debt instruments, but in this new blockchain-based digital wrapper. Some of these will be natively digital, meaning that the asset itself is represented on the blockchain. Some will be sort of a hypothecated, meaning that you have a blockchain representation of an asset that sort of lives somewhere else. In the long run, everything will be natively digital. But when I talk about it, I'm really talking about that, a digital wrapper around traditional assets using these new rails.
Well, Patrick, it's been so fascinating chatting to you. These are exciting times, and thank you very much.
Thanks. It's my pleasure, Jamie.